I think one thing Colossians illustrates is that early Christian theology is responsive. It responds to situations, it learns from the experience of the people it's writing to, and it also tries to deal with real pastoral concerns or pressing situations. So it's not theology in a vacuum. So I think that's important to note that people maybe don't have the resources that we have today. It may sound obvious, but this is an exploration of the faith. And when we look at what they are able to understand of their own beliefs, with, I guess, so little history and pedigree behind them in terms of their belief in Christ. I mean, they draw on maybe a heritage of Jewish or religious ideas more widely, but I think it's a great illustration of, how quickly they develop a framework in which to express their beliefs. So I think that's one of the core things it does. I think it also reveals the way people continue to build theological understanding from Paul's early letters, and whether this is by Paul or not, there is a development in the theology that things like the eschatology or even the conception of the church changes as the church is changing and growing. So I think there's almost a warrant for us to continue that theological task in our own setting there. And I think that's both gives us insights, but it's enriching and empowering for us. Yeah, I think there's still a lot of work to be done in Pauline theology and Pauline questions more widely. I think we need to continue to look at the question of authorship and see, as I've tried to map out, what does authorship mean, but also what evidence do we have? How do we resolve those questions? What is a good argument one way or the other? And I think there also needs to be a fair degree of humility that we may not have enough evidence for a text such as Colossians. As I've mentioned, there are 95 verses. This isn't a lot of text to decide on the basis of differences in style or word selection. There's some of the arguments I find to be weakest, but it raises questions for me about how much can an individual change their theological outlook? Is a development in eschatology within the ambit of one individual, or is there a point where we think it's developed so much that we have to posit a second author? So I think there are those almost methodological questions or meta-level questions about how we decide some of these issues. So I think there's some of the things I think still require exploration. Above anything, I hope it will spur people on to study the letter rather than to read my commentary. It's the letter that's the jewel, not my commentary. Maybe my commentary might help to clarify the meaning of a few passages. I hope, if it does, it might encourage people to look at a wider scope of evidence beyond the text, both the setting of Colossae, the wider cultural setting. So I hope maybe it maps out some of that. It definitely doesn't answer all those questions. There's work still to be done. I hope it will also encourage people not just to describe the text or outline the contents in future commentaries. I hope it will encourage them to ask the why question. Why was the author writing this? Why did he put this content in? What job did he want it to do? So I think in some ways they're, at one level, the more interesting questions. We still need to do the close philological assessment, but there's a question of what is this doing? What is the author trying to, or what response is he trying to evoke? So I hope there's at least the beginnings of that in there. And, I hope people will maybe take something away about the richness of the Pauline writings as a whole, and even be spurred to read them more regularly and see that they do give us ways to handle theological questions of our own day.